Good morning, friends. It is 10 a.m. and this is the Animation Truman Show with perhaps a little bit more forward direction than sometimes occurs in these somewhat meandering live streams, of which this will hopefully not be one. This is one that is going to be pretty focused. Well, what's going on? If we look at the status of the show that I'm producing, I have compiled the webisodes that have been released here on YouTube into a single full-length cartoon episode, as you can see here. The good news, I guess, to a degree, is that the standard length for an animated cartoon, looking at a variety of anime and Western shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender and blah, blah, blah. Basically, the length is 22 minutes. My episode is 26. So I have a lot of room to actually chop this down if I want to and make the edit flow a lot faster and smoother. However, the number one goal is to go through the whole episode now yet one more time and find anything at all that I'm not happy with that I think could be done better. And it turns out that that process began yesterday with literally the first shot in the show. So there it is. Here it's a 3D parallax shot, and the original shot was actually assembled and put together in Blender. So what I wanted to do was do some serious aggressive fix-ups on the background painting itself. And by the way, say hello to Zuko, the African gray parrot, who is chirping in the background. Good morning, Maria. And I wanted to go ahead and move it over to Tahoma 2D and reproduce the shot, which was able to be done very, very quickly. The main thing was going ahead and doing a bunch of repainting. So let's see what that entailed. Number one, this is the original shot. This is what was in the show as published on YouTube, okay? This is what I painted yesterday. Now, you're not seeing all the layers composited together here. You're just seeing the front layer. But you see the difference in the level of detail, okay? Now, it isn't that I had to do this. It's a judgment call. This is a cartoon, and so if you want to have more simplified backgrounds, more power to you. That's what you do. In my case, I really felt that I wanted to punch it up and do a little better job on the background painting. So that was my choice, and I spent a little time yesterday while having a wonderful Zoom live stream call with family. I was actually painting in the background and doing this. So now the question becomes, well, what about this 3D parallax shot? When I looked into my folders, what I found was that there was a Blender file that took each of these layers. So this would be the sky background. Not quite sure what that is. There's some clouds. Right now the clouds are not in the shot, so maybe we should fix that pretty soon. Here's the key layers of foreground and background that I painted over. Mainly it was these two that I did painting over. So as you can see, I punched up the detail on these buildings here in the background, and obviously the main focus was this foreground, because when you look at the final shot, morning Darren, when you look at the final shot, you've got this is really the focus. This is where the camera's moving. So now the question for someone who's dealing with Tahoma 2D or OpenToonz, how do you do a 3D parallax shot? First thing I want to know is a couple things about OpenToonz versus Tahoma 2D. As far as I'm concerned, and Darren, you can confirm this, but basically my feeling is it's pretty much parity between the two programs. They are the same program for all intents and purposes. I am using Tahoma 2D version 1.3, and that's a fairly new release that folds into the program a lot of the improvements that happen over on the OpenToonz side. So you can think of OpenToonz and Tahoma 2D as being the same program. One is a fork of the other. There are small differences, but in terms of the type of stuff I'm showing today, not enough difference to shake a stick at. It's pretty much, you can think of it as the same program. Okay, so having said that, one of the features of OpenToonz and Tahoma 2D is what's called toggle implicit hold. Toggle implicit hold says that if I put a picture in a layer or a level, as they're properly called in OpenToonz or Tahoma, in Krita, we refer to these as layers. You know, take your pick. Okay. By default, if you throw in a picture and then go to the next frame, the picture does not extend like this image sequence here extends down the column through time, right? Okay, so when you toggle implicit hold, you know, kind of a quirky name for the feature, but the gist of it is that when we turn it on, if just having inserted one picture into a level causes it to basically prevail forever on the timeline until you replace it with another picture. Now, the reason I point that out is there's a very important thing to be aware of about Tahoma 2, at least with my workflow. Very important thing to be aware of about that, and it is this. On balance, those of you who've been around for a while know that probably 2/3 of the animation on this show is Krita, is done in Krita, and maybe 1/3 is done in Tahoma 2D. It may be more like 3/5, 2/5, but basically my workflow is split between the two. Without a doubt, I've gone through phases where I've sort of preferred one or the other, but I have to say that on balance, if your goal is performance, features, and stability, and you want the sweet spot that combines the best of those three, you want the features you need to do what you want to do, you want the software to perform and not bog down, and you don't want it crashing every 5 minutes. By far, no question about it, and I don't think I'm going to change my mind about this anytime soon, is the best workflow is to basically create art in Krita using layers and blend modes and things like that, and then judiciously at specific points in the process, when it makes sense to do so, take that imagery over to Tahoma 2D for animation. Okay. Implicit hold breaks copy and paste. Okay? That's an important thing to be aware of. If you take an image from Krita and you select all, for example, you Control-C, you cut it to the clipboard, and by the way, this is why I don't use OpenToonz. The main reason I use Tahoma 2D is because I can cut and paste on the clipboard across the two programs. Okay, if I paste that image in here, and we'll wait for that to paste in. Okay, actually it appears that it's not working. So my guess is that that's because of implicit hold. What I noticed yesterday was that when I pasted in an image, yep, and then turned on implicit hold, which kind of makes sense. You know, you've got this image and you say, well, I want this image to continue, you know, across the whole, and by the way, you can see this is actually hidden behind other layers, but that's irrelevant for the purposes of this discussion. In fact, if I go like that, I can solo the layer. So I've got the tilde key set to actually turn off all other layers and only turn this one on. You can set that up in your hotkeys. But anyway, what I discovered yesterday is that if you have implicit hold turned on, and then you come over here and you say, well, in Krita, maybe I make some change or some addition to this image, and I want to go ahead and add another image to the sequence in Tahoma. You cannot do it. Okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and grab the same. Actually, what I'll do is I'll grab a little piece of it like this, so that I'm actually grabbing something different and cutting it to the clipboard. Now what should happen is when I hit Control-V, it asks me if I want to paste in place. And okay, so go figure, now it works. Your mileage may vary. For me, this is the first time that's worked. In the last day, in the last 24 to 36 hours, that's the first time it's worked. So, as I say, your mileage may vary, but it seems to me that using implicit hold with cutting and pasting from the two programs, you know, from one to the other. Well, actually, I should say from Krita to Tahoma, because you can't go back in the other direction, is dicey. Okay. Tahoma does definitely seem to get confused about what's on the clipboard if implicit hold's turned on. And yesterday, when I turned implicit hold back off, the cutting and pasting immediately happened exactly as expected, and it was not a problem. Notably, if you have an image in a level and you want to go ahead and build up an image sequence, then when you go to hit Control V, Tahoma will say, do you want to paste in place? And that's what you want to do. If you go with the default, it's actually going to put it in a separate new level. Okay, so that's just something to be aware of. Okay, so that's my workflow, and now the question becomes, actually an important question becomes, oh yes, hold on, I gotta hit, is it Alt tilde or Control Alt tilde? Shift Alt tilde. I can't remember what my hotkey is to turn off the soloing, so I'm going to just go ahead and, rather than waste everyone's time here, I'm just going to manually turn these all back on. So for me, and it's because I really don't use it that much in Tahoma, and I haven't in a while, but basically if I hit the tilde key, whatever column is selected gets isolated, if you will, and then I have another hotkey combination to undo that, and I just don't remember what it is at the moment. So anyway, okay, so in this case, I was saving the images from Krita to hard disk and then dragging and dropping them into Tahoma 2D. You can do it either way. The important thing to realize is that if you do the cut and paste thing, number one, realize that the images that you cut and paste across the clipboard don't exist anywhere except in memory. Okay, they go to the clipboard, you paste them in, they show up in Tahoma, but they're not saved anywhere. So the only way you in fact save the images that you cut across the clipboard is to do save all, which then saves your animation project file, your TNZ file, but it also will take any images that are in the levels and save those. Why do I point that out? Well, because in this case, part of the reason I dragged them from the hard drive is because Scene 325 had a subfolder that contained all the constituent images. If I'd used the clipboard, then when I used Save All in Tahoma 2D, what it would actually do is save those levels that were cut across the clipboard into the project extras folder. Okay, so this folder right here contains zillions of images that for one reason or another are either what Tahoma 2D calls raster levels, which is just a standard paint level. Those get saved here, and also anything that was cut in the clipboard is also a raster level, and so they get saved in the extras folder as well. In this case, I didn't want that. I wanted to keep the constituent layers all in one place so that if I changed them, I could go ahead and I knew where to go to access them and maybe make some more modifications. Now in this case, let's just note here that we do need to add the clouds layer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now just for kicks and giggles. So here in Tahoma, I'm just going to drag it in there like that. And because of implicit hold, as you can see, the clouds are, the image prevails over the entire animation. Now, I'll get to the parallax thing here in just a moment. I'm just going to do one more thing first, which is I'm going to hit the A key, and actually I'm going to scale the clouds up a bit. And then I'm going to change their position to something like that, something that just feels about right. And then over the length of the entire animation, which by the way, this is wrong. This should be 120 frames. Interestingly, well, let me check one thing here. I want to look at my camera animation. Okay, I want to check this. Bear with me, friends. I just want to check something because it looks like I made some changes to the length of the animation and neglected to save it earlier this morning. So I just want to check. This image sequence does in fact go to 120, so that's correct. Okay. Okay, so this camera move, I actually want it to be more slow, just and have it take place over 120 frames instead of 60. So that's that. Okay, so the thing I wanted to do before I show the parallax thing is I wanted to take the clouds, and I think what I'll do is I'm going to hit shift and drag them a little bit to the left and then go down here to 120. And I'm going to just drag these guys a little bit like that, just so there's a little bit of movement. And actually, I guess I need to probably move the whole thing down a bit so the camera can see them. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this keyframe, and I'm going to just come up here, grab that keyframe and paste it. So I'm going to copy it so that I can now shift drag this a little bit like that. So that just puts the clouds in the scene, and as the camera moves, the clouds are drifting a little bit. Okay, now I'm noticing a couple other things here. Yeah, unfortunately we have a minor glitch in that I made some fixes to sort of finalize this scene. That how I managed to do it, I don't know, but I guess I was moving too fast, and so the changes I made earlier this morning are not in the file, so I need to resave everything here in just a minute. But step one is to go ahead and get everything back up to snuff, as it were. I'm not happy with those clouds, but let's get to parallax. So the gist of the parallax thing is this. A lot of people who use Tahoma or OpenToonz don't realize that you really have three ways that you can look at your scene. The default doesn't really show you what the camera's seeing. It shows you everything that's in the scene. So as you can see, the images are quite a lot larger than what the camera's actually looking at. Probably, even though it's the third icon here, the second way one might normally look at the scene is to say, well, what's the camera seeing? Okay, so this is what the camera sees in this shot. The third way is to actually look at your shot in 3D. Okay, so as you can see, I'm hitting Control Spacebar, so it's the same hotkey you normally use to rotate your screen. So as you can see, all of these layers are distributed in 3D space. So the first question I think someone might ask is, well, how do you get them distributed in 3D space? And it's really very, very simple. You simply grab the layer, hit the A key for the animate tool, and you're going to change the position. And normally if you drag this, it's only going to go up and down or left and right, X or Y, right? Okay, so you just hit the control key. That's really all there is to it. By hitting the control key, you can move it forward or backwards in 3D space. And then typically when you look through your camera, if you move it back in 3D space, of course it's going to get smaller and smaller in the distance, right? So you have to compensate for moving it back in the Z-axis by making it larger. And so then once you've done that, as you can see, each of these are sort of appropriately scaled. Then when you look through the camera, everything kind of looks normal again. Okay, and so why would you do that? Obviously you can do a 3D move, and I do it a lot in my show by simply cropping the camera. You know, a slow crop looks like the camera pushing in. But you don't get the effect of the layers. You don't get parallax. You don't get the feeling of the layers moving at different relative speeds because they're further off in the distance. As you can see here, the forward layer seems to be moving more rapidly than the layers that are far in the background. Okay, so that's why you do parallax. Point being, in OpenToonz or Tahoma, you can set up a 3D parallax shot in just a couple minutes, really. You know, you just you just spread your layers out. And then normally the next thing you would do is you would find your initial camera position. So there's this column called camera 1, which is the, you know, that's the scene's camera. And what you would do is, again, you'd hit the animate tool. Don't be fooled into scaling the camera. If you're accidentally in scale mode and you start dragging around, you're going to see that the camera's perspective will change. But that's because what you're really doing is you're changing the lens length of the camera, and that won't give you the parallax effect you want. So so you really want to be in position mode because you're wanting to take a fixed camera and move it in space, right? So if you look at it here, as you can see, over time, if you look closely, you can see the camera is basically moving forward. Now, the parallax effect would be exaggerated if the camera was scaled. And I actually don't know that I've ever even done this. So I'm going to go ahead and save I'm just going to save all right now. This will take a second because Tahoma is going to want to save all the images. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what the scaling option on the camera actually does. I want to see if it just makes the camera bigger, or what I expect would be it's going to take it from a wide angle lens to a very narrow, long lens. I have no idea if that's exactly what will happen. So again, we're in the camera layer. I'm going to go with scale, and yeah, see, look at that. That's what I'm talking about. So now if you wanted to, you can experiment with this yourselves. But if you wanted to exaggerate the parallax effect, the way you would do it is you'd scale the camera down so that it's a very, very long lens, like that, and then move the camera. Well, actually, it's the opposite. If you move the camera way back, that will be a less extreme parallax effect. And the reason is because if you think about the distance from the camera to the stuff the camera's looking at, the relative change in distance between the camera and the first layer, and the distance between the first layer and all the other layers behind it, is much smaller. That proportion is much, much smaller if the lens is really long and the camera's way far away. So if you wanted to exaggerate the parallax, actually what you'd do is you'd go with a very short lens, okay? And then in my case, the way I would do it is, and of course in this case it's going to animate the I'm going to have to reload my scene because it's going to animate the lens length, which is not really what I want. But if I go over here, you can see that now the camera, because it's a wide lens, it's picking up way too much. And the solution, of course, is to take the camera and move it much, much, much closer to the first layer. And as you can see, just to get all the layers in, because that proportion, the proportional distance of camera to its subject versus the distance between each of the individual layers is so great that I actually would have to push the camera in really, really far just to get all the layers into the shot. See what I mean? So anyway, the crux of the lesson, if you will, of course, is that this is how you do 3D parallax in Tahoma 2D, and it's really fast to set up, you know. So I'm going to go ahead and reload my scene because I don't really want to. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to reload my scene. I'm going to hit undo a few times. Let me just change this. Okay. Yes. I'm the reason I'm not going to reload the scene is because I guess I did do save all a minute ago, didn't I? So let me look at this. I seem to have a rogue keyframe there that I don't want. So, okay, so basically as far as hey Ed, who's in here? Good question. It looks like just, it might be just you and me at the moment. According to YouTube, I've got one concurrent viewer. So what's going on with you this week? I haven't really been lurking on YouTube a lot, so I don't really kind of know what's been going on out there. I've been too busy getting my show. Well, and basically, here's the reason. The reason is I've taken all of the. At this point, I've got all 48 minutes of. Well, actually, it's about 52. I have about 52 minutes of show done, and so now I'm taking all those webisodes and compiling them into 24-minute episodes for distribution. So it won't be too long, probably, before the webisodes are going to be taken down off YouTube. Actually, I don't know when that's going to happen, but at some point it is going to happen. And the way I look at it is, it's not like anybody's going to care, because the views on the webisodes are so low that it's a joke anyway. So shame on me for not being out there promoting and being a social butterfly. But the fact of the matter is, I've made the firm decision that that's just not what I'm about. And frankly, consumers are not my customer. My customer is distributors, platforms, and networks. That's who my customer is. So any benefit that accrues to consumers, especially along the way here while I'm creating it, is really just a side effect of me hunkering down and doing the work. So that's my attitude. It's a little unusual attitude, I suppose, for a YouTuber, as it were, but it's really the way I look at it. I've kind of decided that for the most part, social networking is just a distraction from doing the work, really, for the most part. And I know I'm never going to grow a big YouTube channel, right? So, and why would I want to? I mean, you're gonna, it's like almost anything else will make more money. Not to be too cynical about it, but you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, Darren, you've done a much better job over the last year or so of growing your channel, and I don't know how it's going, but for me, I'm actually bailing on the whole Patreon and all that. I've taken the links off the videos. I just don't care. It's not like I need people to send me $10 here and $20 there to pay my bills. So it's like, screw it. I don't even. I'm just going to work on making cartoons, okay, That's what I'm going to do. Everybody else can do what they want. So anyway. But anyway, if you're curious about Parallax and Toma 2D, and anybody has any questions, post them in the comments, because obviously you guys who are here pretty much know how to do this, doing this anyway. Know how to do this probably for the most part. So... So that's where we're at now. If I get back to the show, it is like you say, Darren, slow and steady. I ultimately I want to make a show that's great. So kind of funny that it was literally the very first shot in the show yesterday that I'm like, well, got to redo that. Got to punch up the background painting, and so then this morning, I've actually taken these shots of Asher. He was just a little bit off character. His head was like too tall. So it's just this meticulous process. And I'm sure you guys will agree with me that it's worth it to get it right. It's worth it to get it right. Now, Ed, you say it's taking me forever for making animation for YouTube. Are you just referring to the fact that your animation process is on the slow side in terms of, because obviously your production values are pretty high, so one would expect it to take a little longer. But is that what you're referring to? Just the fact that you feel like you're kind of on the slow side or something? Or are you talking about, because you said you're working on a project, I'm assuming that's probably something you can't maybe talk too much about or something? No, it's pretty weird. I'll show you guys this. Reading this book was quite interesting. This book right here. It's called Binge Times. Read that book this week. And that's Inside Hollywood's Furious Billion-Dollar Battle to Take Down Netflix. So in fact, I called my sister because she, I'm like, your company figures heavily in a couple of the chapters of this book because she works for Apple and has worked for Apple for many years. And let me look at the really slow. Yeah, but slow's okay. Slow's okay if the quality's there. And in your case it is, so it's worth it, right? It will do. I was watching your Spider-Man stream today. You're being very meticulous with your drawing and animation. Absolutely. Ed exemplifies care. Here I'm the opposite, where I'm going back and there's so many shots because I've tried to move so fast at different times that I'm having to refix things all the time. Because when learning something, you add it to. That's true. You learn a new tool or feature. So I guess I do want to reiterate what I said earlier today about workflow. I have firmly, because of trying to find the sweet spot, and I actually think this would benefit you, Ed, in particular, is when you look at finding the sweet spot between the features that you want in your software, having them be stable so the software doesn't crash all the time, and then generally being performant. Okay, if those are your goals, then this working together between Krita and Tahoma 2D, especially through the clipboard, just seems to be the sweet spot, for me. So, because you cannot do the plastic tool in Krita. There's just no way to do it, and you can't really do liquefy in Tahoma, right? Hey, Blifton, but you can sure jump back and forth, and but of course, if you're in Ed's case, for those who don't know, here's a guy who is very much doing frame by frame animation, right? He's not using, unless something's changed recently, he's not using a ton of digital tools to enhance the animation process and basically save work and avoid drawing. Whereas I've been like, it would be, golly, that's so true, Darren. But I will say this: there is a bit of a middle ground. And by the way, I'm going to save my work here because I think I'll come back to this one. Let's pull this up. I'm just going to pull one of these shots up. So one thing I have found is it is tricky. It is difficult. But if you really, really, really want liquefy, and especially if you're in a situation where you've got to make, it's always a calculus between more ink and paint, more drawing, versus is there a way to fix something without having to spend an hour. To me, it's that's the calculus. Is if I can do something in 5 minutes instead of an hour, then I'd rather do it in 5 minutes, because I just don't want to have an impeded creative process. And of course, you constantly have to ask yourself, but is it really as good? Is it good enough? Kind of thing. So in this case, here's an example. Let's play with it. Melchizedek is, well, first of all, let's get rid of that animation keyframe and then go to this view. So first and foremost, you can see that Mel was not sized properly for what I'm about to fiddle with. Okay. So if I hit the X key and go to liquefy, and I'm saying if this is a situation where what we're trying to do is solve a characterization problem, okay? Can you do what you can do with liquefy with the plastic tool? And the answer is basically yes, but you have to know how to set it up. So one of the keys is, first of all, okay, if I'm going to animate this guy, then okay, yes, of course I want to have a basic skeleton that's going to allow me to, that wasn't supposed to be there, that's going to allow me to do the basics, okay? So then what you learn with the liquefy tool is, first of all, if you have to solve a characterization problem, then the way to do it is you basically, let's call it the spider web technique or something. What you do is you create this flywheel of nodes. so that you pretty much can be sure that you're going to have control of what you want to have control of. Okay, so I'm actually putting a couple of these near his eyes. Like, what if I wanted to change the position of his eyes? And then I say, well, but what if I also wanted to protect the positioning of his headband, right? So what you do is you wind up creating a situation like this, and you never exactly know what you've got until you start fiddling with it. Okay, so in this case, as you can see, there is some ability to, as I say, fix a characterization problem. You could do it, especially if you weren't going to animate with the plastic tool. If you were just going to use it to just make corrections, right? The actual correction in this one would be his chin. Okay, if we're talking about Melchizedek specifically, the problem right here is this. His chin really is not the right shape. So, like I said, the question is this a better solution? And as you can see, it's a little dicey. So then you learn that you go, oh, okay, what I don't want to do is just have one node. What I really want to do is have like a little, I call it sort of a T, like that. You put in a T node, and in this case, it's not working very well. So you experiment around, and then what happens is you have this continual, as I say, it's a calculus. You have this continual thing you're observing in your mind where you're going, okay, have I crossed this threshold where all of a sudden trying to do it the easy way is taking longer than doing it the hard way? And that's really what it's always about. In this case, this is demonstrating the very worst about the plastic tool. This is what sucks the most about the plastic tool, is this pinching. The pinching is pretty atrocious. So Ed says, I tried doing puppet animation. It took me forever to find what to cut for each body part rather than just draw it. Now, I agree with you. And actually, that's why I don't do it either. It's been a really interesting path to figure out what the sweet spot is between hand-drawn animation and, let's call it, digital tools, right? And for me, the sweet spot is to look at it as an editor. The most important, and I'll say this very strongly, the most important thing to the viewer, okay, as I'm watching this show, this is really important, you guys. The most important thing, I'm firmly convinced, to the viewer is this. Number one, do the characters have high appeal? Is the still frame, is it pleasant to look at the character? Are they well designed? That's number one. Number two, same thing with the composition. In this case, it's just simple stuff like observing the rule of thirds. This shot is not great. This is not great. I could have done better. I did this quite a long time ago, and frankly, I should have done better. Why? I'll show you. Let me reload this one, and I'm going to discard all my changes, and I'll show you why this shot is actually flawed. Okay, here's why. Melchizedek, to be a more balanced shot, Melchizedek should really be about here, and Asher should really be about here. Now that creates a problem in this case because it actually turns out that the Asher that we have in the shot is baked into his background. It actually consists of two complete paintings. So it's just like two poses. Okay? So, but simply by observing the rule of thirds and doing what I just did makes this shot kind of a lot better, actually, compositionally. So anyway, and I'll fix that and bake it in. But so let me continue this because this is really important. This is why I reuse. On the last section of the show, I reused so many drawings where I went and found the best drawings of the characters I could, and then cut and pasted their heads into other shots, and it just, there is no question it raised the production value. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and redraw things that had already been drawn a zillion times, I just picked picked the good stuff and repurposed it. So this is what matters the most. Number one, character appeal. Number two, composition. And then number three, just the pacing of the editing. Right. So in other words, like what you get with your storyboard, the idea that you're, and I don't think you guys can hear the audio, but it's the pacing of cutting and, changing shots frequently enough to keep the variety, to keep the show moving. Here we have a wide, a wide profile view. I really firmly believe, and the reason I believe this is because that if you find a really, really, really good web comic, like an animated web comic, where all they did was just essentially take a storyboard and give it lip sync, what you find is if the soundtrack is good, the appeal is almost as great as a lot of anime that you could watch. It's not that far behind. So in other words, the least important thing is the motion. It's not that it's not important. It is important. It's very important, but it's the least important. The pacing, the editing, and the poses and the characterization are all more important. So for me, increasingly what I find, the way I think about it is I'm always going to think about what in the comic book world, and Ed, you know this because you've done a lot of coloring, and I'm not sure what all you've done in the comic book space, but I know you've done a lot of coloring work for Marvel and whatnot, is that what you call in comic book world storytelling. When you think of Jack Kirby or John Buscema and you talk about his great storytelling, well, what are you talking about? You're talking about the variety of poses, just the way he mixed up the shots in order to just make it exciting, make the storytelling appealing. So as I'm going through this is obviously the first full episode, and through this section, I'm seeing a lot of things I want to still improve. I really am. It's crazy. But the storytelling's okay, The storytelling's okay. Most of the characterization's okay. But there's still a lot of things to improve. So if you embrace the idea that it's generally just better to just draw everything, just hand draw everything, then if that view is tempered by a focus on good storytelling and realizing that because think of it this way. Look at this shot. This is a good example of what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we have a shot. Now that was cheap and easy because that was just a camera move, right? But what does your eye actually see and remember here? Think about it. What does your eye actually see? What you see is this. That's what you see. Because everything else is moving, right? You don't see him come into the scene. How well he comes into the scene actually doesn't matter that much, although you don't want to do it too crappy, right? But this isn't, that move right there is not what makes the show. What makes the show is where he lands. So that the viewer can digest, oh, okay, this is the monkey, and there he is, and this is what he's doing, or this is what he's thinking about. So other people may disagree with me on this, and I may be wrong, But I'm pretty sure that, and see, this bugs me because this is actually compositionally weak. This is quite weak. This he should be framed about a third smaller in the frame and then centered better. And this is probably the thing I see throughout the show that I really want to fix. There's a lot of compositional sloppiness. So, but come on, there's always stuff to improve, right? Okay, so in this case, we do have a problem. And I want to look at how I might solve it. So now, if you guys are just hanging out with me, great. Thank you for hanging out. But now I'm going to just kind of get back to, you know, I've kind of covered the parallax thing, and now I'm just going to try to get some work done. In this case, I'm going to scale this shot up a little bit so that now, as you can see, Asher is on the rule of thirds more or less. He looks pretty good. So that works. Now I see a little problem right there. There's some scribble that got into the drawing, so we'll have to fix that, of course. By the way, here's a little joke, guys. You guys notice the book that Asher's reading, I put a little picture of myself in the book. Ah, vanity. Okay, so anyway, back to Mel. Okay, so now the problem here is that Melchizedek, I reframed the shot, right? Well, the problem is that now, and I'm going to say, I think I want to kind of put his eye on the rule of thirds like that. So the problem is that his shadows are now left behind as well as his mouth. So we fix that by hitting F3 to go to the schematic. And also, as I'm kind of talking as if I know it all about composition and what really matters in animation, all this stuff that I'm claiming to be such an expert on, there is a fairly rigorous, I am trying to be more rigorous in my workflow. So one part of that is if I enter a scene and then remember that the columns are not labeled, I am like stop everything, and label your columns. That's the type of thing that I tend to see as being a matter of, okay, you know what, you just spent 20 seconds that's going to pay you off big later when you're trying to do something like this in the schematic and you can't tell which column's which and stuff like that, which is just stupid. So what we want to do here is we want Melchizedek to be the parent, and then the shadow and the mouth are both children of the Melchizedek layer, because Melchizedek is the layer that I resized. Okay? Now, let me check something. All right, this is interesting. Let me think about this for a second. Why is there was not initially, I'm sorry guys, I'm having to think out loud here. There was not initially, maybe there was. Actually, maybe Melchizedek was already scaled to a degree before I made this change. I'm not sure. So I'm going to delete this keyframe. Okay, that's the actual size of the drawing. And so the solution is going to be to actually set keyframes on each of these layers. Unfortunately, I didn't think I was going to have to do that, but so there's the shadow, and I'm going to say there's the mouth. Now, what's the color on the mouth looking like? I'm feeling like that's a little dark. So I'm going to actually soften that up a little bit. And now let's look at the render. The shadow is not quite exactly right. There we go. Okay, that's what we want. Okay, so now compositionally this is stronger than what I had a bit ago. So I'm going to re-render that and smack it into the show. And this is basically where I'm at. Tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of this. Just going through and finding things that are wrong. I really wish to use as many software for my animation, but I have to use only two, Krita and HitFilm. Well, and I agree with you. I think if you're not going to... The only argument for Tahoma, for a guy like you, really has more to do with stability and performance and not having to fight when you get to the animation stage. So it's not going to help you as much if you're just making sequences of drawings. But and Krita is real hit and miss. The thing that's stupid is my old grossly underpowered laptop. The Liquify is more performant on my junky old laptop than it is on my 12-core monster machine that I'm working on right here, and I have no idea why. So what are you gonna do? So you may not have as many performance issues as I do with Krita, right? You know, I know you get, yeah, of course, a little bit of blender. Yeah, and that parallax shot I did today was actually this was a blender shot with images mapped to planes, kind of like what you do with hit film. I'm basically just bringing in all the layers and then doing a camera move. And I ported it over to Tahoma. The port from Blender to Tahoma took about 20 minutes. You know, it was no big deal to redo the parallax move and all the rest. So this shot is what I'm looking at now. We've got this corrected, and then boom. I want to look at this. Okay, I am going to actually amend my... Okay, we've got to fix the drawings on Asher, but I actually think giving Melchizedek a little bit more space over here it actually feels better. So there it is. All right, so and now the best way to do this at this point, now this is here's a tip, okay, and it's a good one for you too, Ed, because to do this in Krita is where performance starts to suffer and things get expensive. Here's what I mean. Here we have a shot where we have scaling that's we've got these drawings that are baked in and we needed to reframe it. So what did I do? To do this in Krita, I would have to apply a transformation mask over the entire layer so that all of the animated frames are folded in by that transformation. No big deal. One layer of transformation masks, not a problem. However, I also had to resize these other layers, and now functionally these three layers all go together, don't they? Well, that means if I change the scaling or the positioning on his body, I got to go through and change every one of those other ones and start, moving things around and trying to get them all lined up again. That's stupid. Okay? Here's the answer. You could use a peg, by the way, in the schematic. Well, let me just say this. What I was going to do is hit insert and just put in a dummy frame, hit the B key, go like that to ostensibly draw a drawing that doesn't exist, and now parent these three layers all to this one. Okay? And that's all you'd have to do. So in this case, you take this and parent it to that. Now, I'm not totally convinced that I couldn't have solved this by just resizing Mel, because I forgot that these were already parented to them. That means that their translations are already taking into account Mel's translation. So I probably should look at this both ways. If I hit the A key and I say position, okay, it looks like I didn't need the extra column. Okay, everything stayed together. So sorry about that. I can go ahead and delete that column. But in case you wondered, the other thing you could do is you add a peg. It just adds, when you add a peg, you go like that, and then what you do is you jump. Now Tahoma shows you that this is parented to a peg. Okay, but then what you do is when you hit the A key, this is the thing. If you hit the A key to animate stuff, and you jump around, you see that it keeps switching to animate whatever layer you've selected. But you do have this drop down where you decide what's going to be affected by the animate tool. So you just select peg 1. And now by moving peg 1 around, you can use the peg layer to make that positioning modification. Now in my case, I don't actually need to do that, because I already had these other layers parented to Mel. So now another thing I see is that the flaw in Asher is not in Asher, it's actually in Mel. There's some noise in this drawing right here. So let's take a look. We need to go to this mode and okay, really, Toma? There we go, there's the problem. So I'm gonna hit the eraser and just go like that. And it looks like there's some garbage that sort of was languishing in these drawings. So there we go. So this is our new shot. That's what it looks like rendered, and I'll give Tahoma credit. It does render fast. Okay, so that should look better. Let's go back. I tell you what, I'll switch this to the full screen preview, and let's just see what we have. Okay, I see a problem. I see a problem. The lightening up of his mouth kind of bit me a bit, which is strange because I didn't think I lightened it that much. Makes me wonder, actually. Let me look at my schematic. I want to look at my effect schematic. And by the way, that peg can be deleted. It could be, yeah, it could be that the body highlighting effect is having some kind of strange effect on the mouth. So what I'm going to do is just look at what it looks like rendered so that I can then dial this in a little more intelligently. Probably, it's close. It's really close. That's probably pretty good. Yeah, probably there we go. Okay, cool. That takes care of that shot. Back to here. So, oh, actually I wasn't going to do that. I was going to I'm in full screen preview mode. So what we have is just shot after shot that we're looking at ways that we might want to improve it. Okay, so now what about plastic here? I kind of see a flaw in one of those drawings. So Melchizedek says, there's something I was kind of wondering. Okay. Two things that keep coming up over and over that seem to add a lot of production value. One, of course, is eye blinks. And the other, in this case, would be maybe some manipulation with the plastic tool, but probably not. I think I'm gonna. There's no harm in trying. So here we go. Boom, 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 boom. Okay? Okay, stop everything. See that right there? That's garbage. This is where I'm telling you I'm learning to interrupt myself and just go, wait a second. Stop everything. I hate that. I hate when I switch the view. It switches back to the timeline. And do the cleanup properly. Make sure it's all clean. Okay, cool. So now we can get back to business. We're going to create a mesh. And, okay, and so as you can see, we have a problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this keyframe, cut it, and paste it into the plastic tool. Okay, so now the plastic tool is what's actually controlling the scaling. If we jump back here, you can see what's really going on is the plastic tool now is controlling Mel, which is controlling the other layers. Got it? Right. Okay, so now what do we do with that? Well, we hit the X key and we need to create a skeleton. I'm gonna think about this for a second. Because when we get to here, obviously this is we're gonna jump to another level here. Okay, so now I want to stop. I want to stop because there's something I'm seeing that I've bumped into this before. This is one of those cases where it might even be wise for me to stop the live stream because I really have to think about how to solve this problem. So the problem that we have right now is that we do not want the, well, okay, never mind. I know what I can do. Let's check this out. Let's turn off implicit hold. Okay. So now you see Mel is affected by the plastic tool. My question is this. When he turns his head, if the plastic tool does not continue to influence the drawings, which it doesn't, because I stopped it here, does the parenting relationship where the plastic tool is still controlling the scaling of all the other layers, does that continue to work? It looks like it does. So that's good. Okay, cool. So there we go. All right, so now we're back to X key. And this is, I'm going to try something here that's going to look very, very strange. But I want to try it. It's probably not going to look like it makes a lot of sense, and I'm very much doubting it's going to work, but I'm just going to play with this for half a second. I am just curious. And by the way, I'm going to take this. Boy. Okay, what I really should do is go here, and then when I in the show delete the first frame. Here's why. If there's a animation keyframe on the plastic tool level, which of course there is, and then I manipulate the bones, there is no way to differentiate within this one dot whether this is the animation, you know, the positioning, the scaling of the layer, or whether it's the animation of the individual bones. And it often comes up that you want to be able to deal with them separately. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the bone animation on a separate cell. So I just want to check this out real quick. Okay, and then the stupidest thing possible happened. So, okay, fine. As usual, it's always goofy stuff. I mean, it's my own fault. You have to put in these extra bones to ensure that the things you don't want to have move don't move. Okay, so now I just wanted to look at this. Okay, this actually is going to work. Okay, so this is a really strange thing I'm trying to do. And so if you guys are wondering what the heck it is I'm doing, it'll become clear in a minute. And it still could backfire, but I think it's going to work. So this is more bones and more control than I usually put in a plastic tool level, but there's a method to the madness here. Trust me. Okay, so now what that did for me is if we turn on keep distance, I can basically manipulate a bit of a head turn about, probably got about 20 degrees. I know, Darren. I mean, I was thinking the same thing. Or use a peg as well. You know, what you could do here, obviously, is just go insert a key. You could use a peg, but it's probably just as good to do it this way. So go here, take this animation key right here, cut and paste it over here, right? And then go into the schematic and make sure this is actually the parent of all of this. Now, one thing I'm noticing here that is problematic, unfortunately, is that these are following Mel's translations, but they're not actually being manipulated by the plastic tool, and that's bad. So I actually need to do this so that when I use the bones, the mouth and shadow will follow properly because they need to be controlled directly. And so what that probably means, we'll see, but what it probably means, and I'm going to, by the way, I'm going to turn this off so it doesn't distract. It's still there. Okay, it's black. Okay, so I've seen this happen before. I bet that I'll bet you the scene setting, enable column color filter is turned on. Oh, okay, there it went. Did it go? Okay, so that's just something to be aware of, and I'm not going to deal with it right this instant because it's not what I'm trying to do. But as you can see, using the plastic tool broke the... Now that's strange. Turn this off. Now it's transparent. Now that is strange. Camera stand visibility tile. When I turn it off here, it goes black. I can't even wrap my head around that. Might be a dyslexia moment. I'm not sure. But anyway, okay, let's get back to cases here. X key. All right, so why did I do all this crazy stuff? Well, the reason was I was trying to, I'm going to turn off keep distance. What I was actually trying to do here is, it's not going to work. I was really trying to make a drawing correction. And as you can see, the plastic tool just isn't quite smart enough to let me do it. And this can happen sometimes. You would think it'd be possible, and it probably is if you keep fiddling and fiddling. But the idea here is that you're trying to actually distort the drawing. We're back to liquefy, basically, here is what we're doing. And it just doesn't usually work that well, unfortunately. And as you can see, it can turn into a real hot mess in a hurry, actually. See, and this kind of thing about the plastic tool drives me insane, right? You've got this node, and like on what parallel universe would moving this to distort this, you would say, oh, and of course what I want is for all of these nodes over here to move in the opposite direction. It's just stupid. So unfortunately, friends, we're going to have to backpedal. Okay. So if we want to fix this properly, the way to do it is to go over here and do it the Ed Tadeo way, which is to actually just fix the drawing. So that's what I'm going to do. Sorry. It's just so silly. It's like, what the hell was I thinking when I drew this? It's so sad. So really, I'm just saying that this should be about here, and this should be about here. Okay? Now this is very difficult because, let's see, it's the G key to sample that palette entry. It's difficult because, for me, the existing drawing distracts me from being able to see clearly what I'm trying to do to fix it. Does that make sense? So in this sense, it would be easier to just redraw the thing from scratch and not have the distraction of looking at the original drawing that I'm trying to correct. So I have to kind of use my imagination here because I'm seeing that this is actually wrong. So what would probably work better is just to erase a bunch of stuff, like so that I can get a clean bead on where, nope, darn it, I did it again. Okay, I just hit the X key. I did not mean to. B key, you know, God forbid you ever hit the wrong key, because now you're having to hit 75 other keys to just backpedal one step. All right, so, whoa, I think that's better. Okay, G key, F key, B key. Let's clean this up. So anyway, I guess the story here is that I see a lot of this. I see a lot of this type of work in my life for the next couple weeks. Going through the full-length episode 1 and just saying, okay, I really just want to fix this, fix that. This is what you're seeing right now is the reason why Alan Dan doesn't use OpenToonz anymore. This is the worst of OpenToonz and Tahoma. The worst thing about the program, actually, I mean, arguably the single worst thing about OpenToonz is that you go to draw over top of what you drew before, and it's like, well, no, you don't really want to draw over that. No, you couldn't really want to do that. And so you have to scrub over it just to convince it that you really do want to draw that. And then in doing so, it winds up making the lines way too thick, and so then you have to go in with the eraser and clean them up, and it's a nightmare. That type of thing right there is a big reason why I favor actually creating art in Krita and then just cutting and paste it over to Tahoma for animation. Because the animation tools in Tahoma are vastly superior, overall, and more performant. Okay, so now can we maybe repurpose this to a degree? I'm going to grab this section right here and cut it to the clipboard, and now let's see. Is this, yeah, that's that pose. And we'll come back to the plastic tool, obviously. I'm just gonna do it this way. Just not happy with what I had there. Okay, and now we have to be careful, because if I accidentally, right now, if I accidentally click anywhere outside of this selection, the selection will be lost and it'll be brutally difficult to get it back to the way it was. Hitting the control key here to basically get that lined up, and that actually looks okay if I fix his chin. So okay, G key to sample the palette, and then let's get rid of that. Let's take the E key and chisel that out. Okay, so as far as his, his neck, that is, I think, a little better. It's just that it's ugly. So right here, Tahoma seems to be doing a good job. I guess the key is you have to get rid of the lines. You have to really get rid of the lines. If the lines are there, in other words, Tahoma makes a distinction between lines and areas. And if the lines are actually there, then Tahoma doesn't know if you really want to draw over them. If it's just areas, then it doesn't have a problem. So, kind of explains it a little bit. Now I gotta switch to that. Okay, let me just see what I've got. Okay, yeah. So probably something like that. G key, F key, that fills it in. Let's back up here, and okay, we definitely have a little bit of a problem with the hair. E key, the eraser. B key, grab my ink, close that. G key and fill it. Okay. We're getting there. We're getting there, people. All right. Now, excuse me, let's look at the render. Okay, so the skeleton we're going to get rid of, and we're just going to start over, and we're going to do it the simple way. So now when I'm doing, usually with plastic tool, this is what it really looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 nodes. And then what you do is you go ahead and put some extra nodes here at the bottom to protect the stuff that you definitely don't want to move. And in this case, you might put a little joint there at the neck. That's pretty much it. Okay. So now, as you can see, he moves fairly naturally. Fairly naturally. So what I'm going to do is jump that to frame 4 and then have a 2-frame tween. And that's it. Okay, and now we switch to that drawing. So why is this drawing my question here now is, why do we even have 2 drawings here? What's the difference between them? 1. The only difference between them is the neck. So I'm going to take this, delete it out, and then hit fill in empty cells. There we go. There we go. Sorry, guys, gotta go. No problem, brother. Just go get your sleep, man. That's more important than watching my stupid live stream. Like, by a long shot. Okay, so it looks like we're in good shape here. So his neck looks... wait. Strike that, friends. Look at that. Okay, I know what I need to do. The reason for that is probably because the mesh generation needs to be recalculated. So let's go to create mesh here, and let's regenerate the mesh because I think it's missing. I don't think that flaw is in the drawing. It's not. And so, oh, there it is. There, it's fixed. Okay, cool. And why is that? Okay, I don't know quite what to... This is another one of those moments that makes me want to maybe stop the live stream because I'm like, you know, how long is it going to take me to figure out why that's happening? Right? Hey, Laura Solik. I don't think I've seen you here before, so welcome to the live stream. Okay, so we don't need to edit the mesh, but we could try it just to be safe. So we'll basically add a little latitude here on the mesh. Seems a little ridiculous to have to do that, but okay. All right, so now let's go back to animate mode. All we're trying to do is just add a little tiny bit of secondary animation here on our character. So, and the issue I'm having right now is when I look at it rendered. Okay, it seems to be fixed now. So moving the mesh around seemed to do the trick. Why? Yeah, that is really strange. The other thing is the shadow is not clamped. Well, the other thing is the shadow is actually a little bit... It needs to be edited for sure. And okay, so this is a well, I was going to say this is a classic problem that once the plastic tool is controlling a level, you cannot draw directly into it, which does make sense because the plastic tool bones have actually moved things to a different place than where you're seeing them. I don't know if that necessarily makes sense to you guys. There is no solution to this. This is actually a hairy hot mess in a way because there is no solution except to disconnect everything temporarily from the plastic tool, which is probably going to break the relationship between the levels in terms of their sizing, but maybe not. Maybe not. No, I guess we're okay. So that's good. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a really short break here. And can you merge those levels once the shadows are drawn? Well, you can certainly do it by rendering, you know, you could render this out without the background and then re-import the, you know, you could re-import the images. So there's always that option. But yes, you can actually merge TLV levels. But since this is a vector level, you know, you probably would have to pre-render it if you wanted to bake the shadows into the character. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to let this loop, and I'm going to turn off my microphone and be back in a couple minutes. Microphone back on. I guess that didn't take as long as I thought. Okay, so yeah, we've got a Thanks, Darren. The eye blink is not being controlled by the plastic tool. And if I put it through the plastic tool, it's going to be in the wrong position. So I'm just going to leave the eye blink on top. So I'm just going to call this blink. So it's just a utility layer over top of everything else, with the caveat that it does need to be back here so that it's under the shadows. Okay. And okay, I see what's going on. It's because of the plastic tool. So I was wrong. Can't do that. The blink's going to have to be mapped through the plastic tool, which means that I'm going to immediately have to resize it, reposition it. So classic amateur mistake. Am I right? Am I right? Classic amateur mistake. Okay, and the scaling's just a little off, unfortunately. Boom. So I wasn't thinking. This is where, you know, the lesson here is, if you're going to use the plastic tool, you really need to think ahead about your layer structure and whatnot. Okay. And the what makes it cumbersome is that, like, I had to make this adjustment, right? And so you say, well, now I probably should just paint into it to sort of fix it up. Well, you can't in the X sheet. You've got to do it over here because once it's being controlled by the plastic tool, you can't draw directly into the X sheet. So what I'm doing is I'm going to just punch this up a little bit and expand this out a little bit just to make sure it's covering up what it needs to cover up, and hope I didn't make yet another mistake. And there I see a little bit of an issue there. See what I mean? Now this is only on the frame, or on the screen for one frame, so now it still doesn't fall under the shadows, and yet again I'm having to look at structure here. The shadows are not technically over the blink. Everything's being controlled by the plastic tool, and so it appears that that's breaking the... I didn't post it on Discord today, Darren. Sorry. So I guess I think there's a summary here. The summary is that what you guys are seeing right now is this is all of the downside of trying to save time by using digital tools to do things that are ostensibly simple. You know, we're just adding an eye blink. We're just adding a tiny bit of secondary animation. The problem is there's a whole bunch of structural considerations in your scene that go with that, which means that what you thought was going to be simple isn't simple at all, not even close. Doesn't seem to matter how I order this. Of course, this has to be over top of Mel to cover up his eyes. But for some reason, and I literally have no idea what the reason is that the ordering of the columns, that means the shadow is on top. Okay, well maybe it's got something to... Okay, I know what the problem is. It isn't the shadow. My bad. Okay, just yet another mistake. If we go to our effects, here's the problem. The body highlighting effect, what we're seeing is the body highlight effect, okay? The body highlight effect is using Mel as a source Darren, if you have some insight here real quick, just so I don't have to sit and think about this for 20 minutes, spit it out, because this is really annoying. The body highlight effect does, in fact, affect everything in the scene with Mel as the source. Why would it affect all the layers unless I'm being fooled and it's not affecting? What do you got? You got the shadow, the mouth. Maybe it's not affecting them, it just looks like it is. So it seems to me the only solution here is I have to composite these two together. Okay, this is a little obnoxious, but what I'm going to do is insert layer blending INO over the background's going to be Mel, feed this into the body highlight effect and see what happens. That did it. Okay, so what I had to do is composite the blink over top of Mel in the schematic so that the body highlight effect is treating these two as a single unit. The truth of the matter is the body highlight effect is not affecting these other layers. It just looks like it is because they're not actually affected by it. So let's have a peek at how this is flowing. And let's look at it rendered and see if it's kind of sort of working. It looks like it is. So let's render this baby. And go ahead and see what's happening over here in the show. Looking good, looking good. Yeah, I mean, now we're solid. We're solid. Cool. Don't necessarily like the framing of that shot, but that's okay. That's maybe a problem for another session. So, okay, I would like to see boom, jump, bam. Yeah. I'm going to say I want this blink. First of all, let's just move this animation key north so that we don't have to think about it. And I'm going to go a couple frames higher here on this. So letting that pre-render just a bit. Blink. Okay, so now that's horrible. Okay. So, okay guys, what we have is yet another problem. And it's something I've seen before with the body highlight effect. Now, you would not think this could even be possible. Okay. What am I talking about? Well, the body highlight effect basically says, let's take the perimeter of the character and then essentially create a mask that we overlay over top of it and offset a little bit. And hence, you get, this is really just this outline inset, a little bit. And then clamped down to black, then made semi-transparent. Effectively, you get this automagic shadow that follows your character. Okay, I saw this type of a phenomenon in other scenes where I saw similar anomalies with the glow effect, or it might have been the bloom effect. But anyway, here's the upshot is this: the blink of his eyes. Obviously, the blink is completely contained within the perimeter of his body. Okay? So, I see no logic that says it makes sense that when he blinks, that should cause the entire shadow's offset to be changed. Do body highlight on the figure, and then the over node to put the eyes on top. Well, you could do that. So Tom's got a good idea, but okay, so here's what you'd have to do though. Let me show you. Let's just do that because it's a good solution probably. All right. So I'm going to ignore the over node and put the blink back here in the scene. Okay. Technically the over node isn't required. Okay, so now what's probably going to happen is, okay, so now this is weird. Now we're seeing, okay, so the buffers had to recache, if you will. So now you don't see that distortion. So what's the solution? The solution is actually to take this color and just hit the R key and sample the shadow color. Now, wouldn't you know it, you can see what's going on here. It turns out the one thing you can't do is actually use the color sampler on a level that is it's going through the plastic tool. It's like, oh my God, no matter what you do, there's some reason why it doesn't quite work. Okay. That doesn't make any sense at all why that should be the case, but here's the solution. And I don't think it does us any good to turn this off and deactivate it, although it might. Let's find out. Could be what's actually going on is you're not allowed to sample a color that is actually a modification of the real color, modification being invoked by the body highlight effect. Okay, that was a really convoluted sentence, but what it means is that the only solution here appears to be to manually adjust the color and eyeball it, try to make it match. Now, in a sense, you could kind of get away with it in this case for the simple reason that the eye blink is only on the screen for such a short time that you wouldn't notice any slight difference in color. Like right there is a slight difference in color, but not enough to shake a stick at. Okay, and to kind of drive it home, I'm going to make the lashes just a little bit darker. So that's a kludge. Without a doubt, that is a kludge, but it does work. So there is a solution. So let's go here and look at, okay, so now we don't see the shadow jumping around. Again, if the eye blink is within the perimeter of the body that's being used to calculate the shadow, there's absolutely no logical reason why the eye blink should affect the shadow, because the whole perimeter of the body resolves to a silhouette, and the silhouette is not changed by the eyelids, right? So anyway, it looks like we've solved it. So thanks for the tip, Tom. I guess what I did wasn't exactly what you suggested, but at least we came up with a kludge that solved the problem. So let me play this. I like it. I like it. Okay, that's good. So now that sequence is working. I'm satisfied with that. So go back to here. Any questions, class? Is there anything about this that was sufficiently confusing that you want to apply it in your own work and want me to try to clarify what the heck I just did? Because it is a little confusing. So we've used the plastic tool to just, the only reason to use the plastic tool is just to give the guy a little bit of life. That's why I added the eye blinks, right? That little movement of the head and then the eye blink just makes it pop a little bit more. It makes it seem not quite so mechanical. So I think I already rendered it, but. Or right click, regenerate preview. To address Darren and Darren's question, did the frame not just want re-rendering? It's possible. I mean, the anomaly with the eye blink affecting the body highlight effect, that clearly was happening because I turned the preview off and on and yada yada yada. So again, you know, a kludgy solution, but it worked. So there is one other thing I'm seeing here. That's a tween. We can live with that. But here, which drawing is this? Okay, so now this is, I would call this a bug because I'm grabbing images here, but I'm not seeing it accurately reflected over here which drawing I've selected. Now I can figure it out because there's only 3. It's this one. But when you grab the images here, I should be seeing a highlight over here to indicate which drawing is selected. You see that here, for example. As I go through these drawings, which drawing is selected is indicated with a red box that also shows the framing of it. So why this doesn't seem to work, is it because it's a vector level? I don't know. Turning the preview off and on doesn't regenerate the images. So, oh, okay. So right click. Yeah, it's what I call refilling the buffers or refreshing the cache, however you want to say it. So do you, where do you right mouse click? I mean, for me, I'm an idiot. I would think you would right click in the quote unquote image because that's what you're wanting to refresh. Where do you right click to turning the preview? Okay, so you say, or right click, regenerate preview. Okay, so it's not the icon. Could you help me out here? Save all, then look for the link to the images being highlighted. Oh, okay, okay. Save all. Right click on the viewer when you're in preview mode. Ah, regenerate preview and regenerate frame preview. I will say I have absolutely no idea what the difference between those two is. But, okay, work has been saved, level has been saved. Clicking here still shows no indication of which image is selected. So, I'm going to say, for me, that's a bug. Is there any scenario where this would be the desirable behavior? I don't see it. Maybe you guys can. Regenerate preview does all frames, and frame preview is the other eye with drag box. So I guess regenerate frame preview. Oh. Oh, I see. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, this is actually very interesting because now what I said earlier doesn't work, seems to be working. Because it's actually changing the color of the shadow over here, which is insane. Is precisely what I don't want to do. Wowzers. Yeah, that's annoying. Okay. Well, what I was ultimately even trying to do in the first place is just hit the S key and grab this little guy and move it. And what's interesting now here, actually, is isn't the shadow being manipulated by the plastic tool? It is. So that seemed to not work earlier, and it seems to be working now. Let me go here. Huh, very weird. Because I know if I hit... Okay, that is a shocker. You guys probably don't know what the heck I'm talking about right now. If you're in a smart raster level like this, you can't... Okay, I'm going to just say maybe this is a change in... I'm guessing this is a change in Tahoma 1.3. And if it is, it's a welcome change. Okay, Darren, can you speak to this? Because this is a big deal. In other words, for all the time I've used OpenToonz or Tahoma 2D, once you've got levels piping through the plastic tool, you cannot fix things in the drawing in the X sheet. You have to go over to the individual drawing to fix things. Now this appears not to be the case anymore. It appears that with Tahoma 1.3, I can go in here and I can draw into it. Oh, wait a second. Strike that. My bad. I forgot that the plastic tool is no longer operating here. So I'll bet you if I go back to this drawing, I can't draw into it. Yep. Okay. Okay, so now that's interesting because it suggests a very interesting point of workflow. If you use the plastic tool and you find out that things aren't quite lining up the way you need them to, like right here, I want to fix this shadow. What I've done in the past, this is actually quite useful. What I've done in the past is disconnect the layers, or the levels, I guess you'd say. I'm going to just delete these nodes, by the way, and reconfigure this shadow. Okay, but what I've always done in order to go ahead and fix the drawings is go in here and disconnect all these layers from the plastic tool, which is obviously a bit of a pain in the butt. An easier solution is just to delete all of these plastic tool, just delete the influence of the plastic tool, and then go ahead and make your drawing changes and then just re-extend it back down. Never ever thought of that before, but that seems to be something that looks like it would work. So if anybody has any additional insights, go ahead and chime in, but that's certainly useful. Way simpler than having to disconnect all the levels. Yeah, and that's a fair point too, Darren. In this case, actually, especially because here, this makes more sense. If I want to fix this drawing, because if I don't delete the first frame, then it's going to create another frame when I start drawing on it. So you're right. The solution here would be to go like this and then just go like this. So definitely that's a good one. So thank you guys for, just your suggestions. I don't think any of us actually had exactly the right idea on any of the stuff that I'm working with right now. But the whole, sort of the group throwing out of ideas certainly led me to a couple interesting insights and solutions. So that's cool. Also, don't forget that you can change parenting from the X sheet, which is also quicker. Now, that, Darren, I have never done. I have never done that, ever. How do you undo parenting relationships through the X sheet? That's like a totally new one to me. I guess I'll turn on my webcam again. How do you do that? I'm looking at, where do you replace parent direct? No. Below the column thumbnail. So here's the column thumbnail. And you pop it open and you can change what level it points to in purple. The parent's name is the bottom text. Oh, I see. Mel Mesh. Okay. Gotcha. Oh my gosh, and this is even more interesting. Look at this. Okay, so if I don't want it to have a parent, so if I go like that, okay. That is very good. Thank you guys. That's a great idea. But this is even interesting too for people that really want to do a deep dive with the plastic tool, is if you click all the way to the right, you can actually choose which bone node of the skeleton is controlling it. At least I think that's what I'm seeing there, which would be tantamount to going into here and switching this so that you can actually pick and choose which bones the layers are being parented to. That, again, that's for the deep dive. I never do that with the plastic tool because effectively it doesn't really work with rotation. It only works with translation, so it tends not to actually be that useful. But that's the parent, that drop-down list. Thank you. Instead of pointing to the mesh, point to the table. Right. I think I switched it to, I don't know what I switched it to. I probably switched it to table. But yes, thank you. And so, okay. Yeah, so it makes sense. I never realized that. I never realized that this was pointing to its parent. That's funny. What I was about to say is logically, therefore, the one thing I should not see in this drop-down is the word Mel, because it shouldn't be able to point to itself. So yeah, okay, good. Thanks, guys. That's awesome. I like that. So despite my frustrations at times, we do seem to be making progress here. And progress is a good thing. Let's see where we're at in the show. So I just did this shot. Boom. Blink. Okay. So now, do we need to fiddle with Asher's... There's a little bit of criticism I could level against his... essentially his forehead and his cheek structure. At the same time, we are actually at the very, very beginning of the show, so the audience has never seen these characters. So I hate to say that, but the truth is, they have no frame of reference for how picky we want to be. I think we're okay on that one. Now, I'm going to say this is probably a Krita shot because it looks like it's a bunch of frame by frame animation. So this is shot number 0003, and I'll betcha scenes we'll go 0003 and we see nothing, so I guess that actually it might be in here. 0006. My eyes just aren't what they used to be. 00E. So we've got all these letters. What the heck? Scenes. Properties. I'm looking at the properties of these drawings. Yes. It's not a 3. It looked like a 3, but it's not a 3. That's funny. It's not a 3, Dave. It's a J. Oh, it's so discouraging when you're old and decrepit like me and you can't see anymore the way you used to. It can be quite a frustrating state of affairs. What time is it? 1:50. Yeah, I'm coming up in 2 hours. I think I'm going to take a break. I'm like getting hungry and want some lunch, and I'm having to really think about what my strategy is going to be on this particular shot. Because what I want to do is I actually want to do a slight modification of the guy's chin. Look at all these tweens that are just like slop. So, is there a summary? Well, there is a summary. The summary today. What mic do I use? Are you serious? You're asking me what mic I use? Can I ask you, Golden Slime, why are you asking that? Are you asking it because it sounds good or because it sounds bad? Need a cursor magnifier add-on. Yeah, I guess. But Golden Slime, the mic I use is a newer it's a $30 shotgun mic. I'll show you here in half a second. Give me 1 second to go grab the microphone. I'm gonna jump away and then I'll be back. Okay. So, and Maria will. Maria Torres, who's here, will confirm, because I think she just bought one of these as well. But this is a newer NW81, so it's a shotgun microphone, which means it's a hypercardioid, has a very, very narrow polar pattern. It's basically for filmmaking or voiceover where you really don't want to pick up anything except what's right in front of the microphone. And so you can actually mount it on a camera and get fairly good audio, although if you're making a film, you really do want to actually get close to your actors and get a good take. With Windows 11, you press the Windows key to zoom. I'll think about that whole zoom thing. But you can get these on Amazon. They're about $30. Now this is, of course, this is a windscreen that I made with some furry fabric. And this is an amazing windscreen. You can be in extremely high winds and you will not get any, into the microphone with a windscreen like that. But by the way, that does the good thing about these microphones, Golden Slime, is this. If you have a really good condenser microphone that's pretty accurate and or has a warm sound, let's say, like you'd use in podcasting, it is my opinion that you'll record the audio, and then what you're going to actually want to wind up doing is putting a EQ curve around your audio that pretty much centers around 1200 hertz or so, 1000 hertz, somewhere between 800 and 1200 hertz, but has a fall off on both sides. So the EQ curve looks like this. It looks like a hill. Okay, and what that does is it takes out a lot of the bottom and a lot of the top, makes the audio sound darker and not as natural. But in the context of a movie or cartoon dialogue soundtrack, it will make the audio sound more natural. It just sits in the mix better. Well, it turns out that these shotgun microphones, when they are in the hypercardioid mode, which is what you'd use most of the time, their natural sound is pretty much that sound. So the microphone I'm speaking into right now sounds pretty much more like a cartoon or movie soundtrack than it does like a podcast. And the reason for that is that the normal performance of this microphone is designed to have a boxy sound, that boxy EQ that I described. I call it boxy. It doesn't sound as good as a podcast, but in a show surrounded by, the problem is if you have too perfect of audio, like a podcast or whatever, and some anime are guilty of having the soundtrack be this way, and I don't like it. It makes the voices jump out. They sound too real. They don't sound like they're in a show. And, if your recording is too perfect, it sticks out like a sore thumb, and it actually sounds worse. That's been my experience. One of the first movies I did years ago, all the looping, all the dialogue replacement in the movie was done with a good studio mic, and it was perfect. And it actually it got me some criticism. On the next movie, I put that EQ. I made everything in the movie sound a little muddier and a little boxier. And my distributor, who I was just getting acquainted with at that time, this is 10, 12 years ago, heard this second movie and said, "Oh yeah, the audio's like way better." I mean, literally that was his reaction. Much better audio, when technically the audio was much, much worse. It was worse audio that sounded better. And that's what a shotgun microphone is basically doing for you. So anyway, there you go. There you go. I swear to God, I should create a whole new YouTube channel that's just devoted to budget filmmaking, because there aren't too many people in the history of the world that have made a movie that earned $1 million, where they made the movie for a total cost of less than $10,000. Robert Rodriguez has done it. He did it with El Mariachi, and I did it with Healed by Grace. And actually, those are the only two examples I'm aware of. There are probably others, I'm sure there are, but those are the only two I'm aware of. So, yeah, and newer, as you say, Wilgen, 800, 1200. Are you're hey Sifter, you're reiterating, Wilgen, are you reiterating the frequency range I was talking about? I can show you actually. Let's open up Reaper here. I'll show you. This is Reaper. This is a software I've used for movie soundtracks for the last 10 years. Okay, but the project I want to open would be probably, I really want to go back here to probably Salt and Light episode 2. Because I think it has a okay, studio mic. See this layer, this and by the way, yeah, okay. This track is my studio mic EQ'd to match my shotgun. It's not a perfect match, but it's pretty close. And as you can see, if you look at the EQ, there you go. It's a bandpass filter, and it's actually, that's kind of surprising, it's actually centered on 400 hertz, but it's not a very steep fall off. So that would be considered a steep fall off. This is a 4 dB per octave fall off. So it's a very gentle filter. And what it does is it takes my AT4041 microphone, which is a really accurate, flat as a pancake response condenser microphone, typically used for acoustic guitars or flutes. And it makes recordings from that microphone sound more or less like the shotgun. So, there you go. There you go. That's what you do. So, but, I mean, you could, if you want to be safe on a lot of you have to use your ears. You know, you have to use your ears to judge. So if you're trying to match one microphone to another, you got to be kind of careful. And it can be very helpful to look at a FFT filter so you can actually see the frequency response that's coming out of the microphone. If you wanted to match them perfectly, I could explain how to do it if somebody's interested. But yeah, what you find is that the human voice, the range of frequency in normal speech that is most important, that really jumps out at you, is around that 1000 hertz kind of range. So, okay. So now we're back to the Windows 10 magnifier with lens view rather than full screen. Do you know if there's a nice stand, either desktop or floor, for the narrow shotgun mic? You know, obviously, I can't specifically recommend. I mean, I'm using one right now, so like literally, I can show you guys. Let's go here. Okay, so right here, I'm actually using one. So this is and I do not have any recollection of when or where I bought this. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip that back up there. And obviously it's all boogered up now, but I would, you know, my recommendation is don't spend a ton of money, but I would just look on Amazon. Probably Newer has something, you know. I mean, obviously the shotgun came with the mic clip that you need, but you got to screw it onto a stand. When I was doing live action filmmaking, something else I could probably show here. Hang on one second. I'll be right back. This is why I say I almost should start a channel on budget filmmaking, because it's just amazing if you're creative what you can do. So these lights, these are amazing lights. You know, I mean, if you wanna sculpt a look in a film, these beat the most expensive lights you can buy, halogens and all the rest, are vastly inferior to these $30 LEDs, for the simple reason that the LEDs are dimmable, and you can use 2 or 3 of them to to sculpt any look you want. You can turn off all the lights so that the room is dark, and then have these on actually fairly low and get good exposure on a camera. Well, they run on batteries. These aftermarket batteries last 8 hours. And they're only like $3 a piece. They're like nothing. The aftermarket batteries. The most expensive thing about the lights that I was using in live action filmmaking was this. The mic stand. The mic stand they were like $100 a piece. I got them at Sweetwater, and Sweetwater's actually based in my town, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I just went over there and bought like half a dozen mic stands. But yeah, I mean, I could have picked up the mic stands. I could have tried to find them used if I had more time or whatever. But by far the most expensive thing was the stupid stands. Kind of crazy. But okay, Windows magnifier. So you're saying, I'm actually curious about this. There it is. Okay, so I'm on Windows 8, and wow, that just went hog wild. Now, okay, interesting. I've never done that before. That's pretty obnoxious in terms of what you have to do, because you have to use both hands on the keyboard, so I can't imagine using it a lot, because you have to really stop everything and go over like this to do it. But yeah, I never knew you could do that. Windows Plus. Wow. That would be really interesting trying to animate in this mode. Not for me, I don't think. No, if I really have an issue with my screen, the solution for me is to go ahead and buy the the 22-inch tablet screen. So instead of using a 15.6 inch, just get like a 22 or even a 24-inch. So now this is interesting. We still have this icon open. Interesting. So if I go to the okay, so this is interesting too. So now this is a little better. Will this stay on top? Sorry to bore you guys with this, but I assume. Okay, so having that on screen, if this stayed on top, then it would actually be useful. It looks like it does. Okay, there you go. So that could actually be useful, because when I go to my render settings, for example, that's where, for me, this would help. It's just easier to read. Yep. Thanks, Tom. I give you kudos for that one. That's actually one of those things that you never would have thought of. That's maybe kind of useful after all. So. Change to lens view in settings. Okay, well, 22-inch makes no difference. It depends on the resolution you run it at, obviously. 22-inch still running in HD mode. Obviously, everything's bigger. But if you're just getting more pixel resolution, then that definitely doesn't do you any good. You can still wind up with everything looking just as small. You won't want full screen zooming. I'll play around with it, guys. Right. Probably. I mean, I see people using it this type of thing all the time, and little demo videos where they're showing how to use the software or whatever. So you see all the rest, but zoom around the cursor. Yeah. So like I said, I don't want to sit and fiddle with it right now, but I definitely will look into that. Actually, I'm about ready for lunch, so I think this would be a good time to sign off. It's because it's been over 2 hours. But yeah, thanks for all the tips, guys, today. I think it's been a fruitful session, although a little painful, dealing with the plastic tool and the schematic and everything, but at least we're moving forward. So, any final questions or comments? If not, I will sign off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and as you guys know, there will